I paused at the door to my older sister's room, aware of the gravity of what I was about to suggest to her, of what it might lead to, but I had to ask her. I knocked on the door. "Come in, Michael," I heard over the soft music coming from her stereo. I opened the door and walked in, suddenly feeling horribly self-conscious and ashamed. "Hi, Kelly," I said, trying to force some cheer into my voice and, I suspect, failing miserably. Kelly looked up from her bed where she was sat up reading a magazine. At 18, she was 3 years older than me, but she was very slightly built. She had inherited Dad's figure. I took after our mother. I was tall for my age, easily the tallest boy in my class, but though the other boys had broken voices, hairy legs and bragged about their equipment, I was still awaiting puberty. If I had not been so good on the athletics track, I would have been teased, but 2 of the older boys in my class looked out for me and made sure that anyone bullying me would have had the flesh torn from their hides. Despite the 3 years difference in our ages, we looked alike, my sister and I, often in our youth being mistaken for twins. Kelly was also different from other big sisters. While my friends' sisters treated their siblings as annoyances to be loathed or tolerated, Kelly was a friend. Which made what I was about to ask a lot easier, a whole lot easier. I stood in her room and cleared my throat, Kelly looking up at me expectantly. "What do you want, Squirt?" she asked playfully, tossing her magazine to the floor. That is. I have a favor to ask you, Carrie rolled her eyes and laid back against the pillows. "Come on, what is it?" "Out with it, I've got the rest of my life to live in a few minutes." Right. This is it, I thought. I am going to ask her. I have been wanting to do this for the last 2 years and it was now or never. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. "I want to try some of your clothes on," I said, the words tumbling from my lips without my thinking about them, though I had rehearsed them many times in my head. In those imagined rehearsals, the scenario had played out in one of 2 ways. Kelly would laugh at me and then throw me out her room. Or, she would shout and get angry and throw things at me. And then throw me out of her room. Instead, she sat up and nodded. "Okay. What do you want to wear?" she asked, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I don't know." You decide?" "Okay," Kelly said. She got up from her bed and walked over to the 2 massive wardrobes that took most of the space her bedroom had, and Kelly's bedroom was big. She looked at the clothes in the first one and then looked at the clothes in the second one, as if deciding which outfit would best suit me, her younger brother. Then she looked at me, her eyes scanning me up and down as if mentally measuring me. Then she smiled at me. "Would you like to wear a bra and panties?" "Yes, please." She nodded and turned to her chest of drawers, opening the top drawer. She rummaged around in the drawer for a moment and then withdrew a white bra and matching panty set. She threw them to me and then threw me her silk night robe, hung up by the bed. "Here, go back to your room and put these on. Then come back." "Okay?" "Okay," I said. I left the room in a bit of a daze and found myself standing in my room, holding up the underwear, examining it. This was it. I had been dreaming about this for the last 2 years, wondering what it would be like to be completely dressed as a girl and now about to find out. I quickly undressed and was soon naked in my bedroom. I slipped on the panties, pulling them up around my hairless legs. The sensation was exquisite. These were silk panties and the feeling of the material against my smooth legs was indescribable. They were so much softer than my male rough boxers. I arranged my member between my legs and smoothed the front out. There was no hint of a bulge, which was odd. In all the times I had thought about this, my penis had sprang to attention, and though my one and only girlfriend had assured me it was normal-sized, I was worried that it might be a tad too small. Now it was as if it were not there, had never been there in fact. I adjusted the panties until they were a comfortable fit. And they were comfortable, very comfy indeed. I then hooked the bra around my waist back to front, as I had seen Kelly do on numerous occasions, and then twisted it around. I then pulled it up and slipped the straps over my shoulders. I looked at myself in the little mirror set in my wardrobe. I had expected to look silly, to look truly ridiculous in fact. What I saw was a young girl, a little masculine around the face, even with the long hair that grew in a ponytail. I grew a little more confident at the sight of this girl in her underwear, knowing that it was in fact myself. I pulled the night robe on, the soft material sighing around my body as it slipped on. I tied the cord and noticed that it was short, way too short. Any bending in this and someone would see my panties. I headed back to Kelly's room, my heart beating in my chest like a runaway steam engine. I knocked on her door again. That was quick, Kelly's voice floated through. Then the door opened and I was ushered in. I stood in Carrie's room again, this time in her underwear and silk night robe, feeling flushed and hot. Carrie had taken several items from the wardrobes in my absence, and they were now scattered around the room in various piles and combinations. Now I knew why it took her so long to get dressed. She had so many clothes and in so many different combinations that the choice really was mind-boggling. Carrie looked at me, scanning me again. Take that robe off now, she said, and I undid the belt and let it fall from my frame. I handed it to her and she took it, never once taking her eyes off me. Then she walked around me, looking me over again. Then she stood in front of me. "You look good," she said. I smiled at her a little self-consciously. "Really? Really, that stuff suits you. It looks better on you than it does on me, you bitch," she snarled, the anger of her words softened by the soft smile that played around the edges of her grimace. Then she smiled properly. "There's just one thing missing," she said. She took a box from her bed and looked up at me as if debating whether or not to show me the contents. And then she shrugged and opened the box. "If you tell anyone about these, I will string you up by your gonads. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. I knew when she was being serious, and Kelly was not a girl you crossed lightly. She lifted 2 round jelly-like things from the box and held them in the palms of her hands. "These are breast forms," she explained. Then she stuck her own chest out, a not inconsiderable chest at that. "These didn't grow properly until 2 years ago? Up till then I was only in a cup, and now I'm almost AD. But you've had breasts since you were 13, I said, a little dumbfounded. Kelly grinned mischievously. She held up the 2 forms. "No, I've had these since I was 13. Mom bought them for me. Now you can have them." She inserted the forms into the cups of the bra, and I felt the clammy material resting against my own flesh and pulling on the bra in new ways. I always wanted to pass them on. I never thought I'd be passing them on to my brother. She adjusted the bra until it was a good fit and the breast forms were properly supported. I walked over to the mirror to examine my new chest. Kelly is right, I thought, I do look good. Kelly was smiling at me. "Do you want to go a little further?" she asked. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She gestured at her vanity table. "Would you like me to do your hair and makeup?" Yes please. "Then sit down." I sat at the vanity table and Kelly threw a black PVC cape around my shoulders, which she secured at the back. Then, with a wicked grin that unnerved me slightly, she took a soft cover from her bed, the old blanket that had once adorned her cot and which she still kept for sentimental reasons. She walked up to her vanity and threw the cover over the mirror, obscuring it completely. "I don't want you seeing yourself until I'm done with you," she said. I shivered. "Don't worry, little sister, I'm not going to hurt you," she said, turning the chair so that I was sat facing her away from the covered mirror. "Now, let me have a good look at you." Kelly must have spent at least a minute examining my face until she seemed satisfied with what she was planning. Then she took several pots, brushes, tubes and compacts from the large collection on her drawer and set to work. For the next 30 minutes, she painted, brushed, plucked and tweezed my face, at each step from the foundation to the lip gloss, explaining what she was doing so that the next time I could do it myself. I found my heart beating at this. Would there be a next time? Then she went to work on my hair, brushing it out of its ponytail and pulling and brushing around my face and neck, applying mousse and hairspray and styling it gently. Then she removed the cape and brushed my hair around my shoulders. "Nearly done now. Would you like some nails?" "Might as well," I said. "Hold out your hands." I held out my hands and Kelly attached fake fingernails to the tips, which she then shaped and painted in fire engine red. She looked down at my toes and then shrugged. After a few more minutes I had fire engine red toenails too. Right then, Kelly said, sitting down on the bed, "While we wait for that to dry, you can tell me why you wanted to wear my clothes." "Oh, it was an article in a magazine a couple of years ago. It was about this man who wore women's clothes. He said he was a crossdresser and that he enjoyed it, and I remember thinking at the time, I'd like to try it too. I didn't, but it's a feeling that's been building up inside me. I wanted to do it so desperately, but I didn't want to come in here, rifling through your clothes and lingerie without your permission, so I asked you." Kelly looked quizzical. "You've never worn any of this stuff before?" she asked. "No, of course not." Kelly looked dubious for a moment and then she shrugged. "One of my better qualities is an inability to lie. Even when lying would save me from trouble, I just cannot do it." Kelly smiled and stood up, walking over to her chest of drawers. "So, you've never worn a pair of tights before?" "I've worn leggings, for athletics." "Not the same." "Similar, but not the same, believe me." "Sit on the bed." I rose and walked over to her bed, sitting down on it, wondering what was coming next. Kelly held up a pair of tights to the light, examining the pattern. She seemed satisfied and approached me, rolling one of the legs up over her fist. "Hold out your right leg, and just relax, you're too tense." "Sorry," I said and forced myself to calm down. Kelly rolled the right leg of the tights up my leg and smoothed it out over the knee. Then, without being prompted, I lifted the left leg and she did the same again. "Right. You can pull them up the rest of the way yourself, only be careful, you don't want to put a run in the tights." "What happens if I do?" "I rip your eyeballs out," Kelly said, her voice harsh, her face a mask of rage and indignation. Then she smiled, "Only joking, sis, we get a new pair. Only please be careful with those, they are my favorite." She stood and walked to the wardrobe where she stood rifling through the clothes. I shrugged and wriggled my way into the tights, until they were pulled up all the way, the waistband sitting snugly against my tummy, just above the panties. Kelly looked at me. "Excellent. Right then, I think a skirt and top would, aha. Try this on." She handed a pink denim skirt with a RARA-style hemline and a white lace band around the waist. I stepped into the skirt and pulled it up, fastening it around my waist and adjusting it until it hung just right. Kelly watched me and frowned. Are you sure you've not done this before? Positive, I said, this is all new to me. I've thought about it and dreamed of it, but I've never done it. Kelly seemed satisfied with my answer and dived into the wardrobe again. She brought out a white top with holes where the shoulders should be and handed it to me. I held it for a moment and then put it on. It slid over my head and snuggled against my chest and torso as I threaded my arms through the puff sleeves. Then I pulled it down. It was short, exposing about an inch of tummy. It's a bit short. It's a crop top, you idiot, it's supposed to be short. Kelly said, looking at me with a critical eye. I was right, you look way too good. You're a jailbait girl. I smiled and looked down at myself. The skirt and top were just right and my legs poked out from under the hem. Right then, shoes, said Kelly. She knelt down and started rummaging around in the bottom of her wardrobe. You are a size 7, yeah? Yep. Good. From the base of her wardrobe, she produced a pair of high-heeled sandals, a pair of black knee-high boots and a pair of pink and white trainers. She lined them up and smiled up at me. Which would Madam like to try? She asked. All of them? Very good, Kelly said, and we spent the next 10 minutes trying on all 3 pairs. The sandals were a little tight and walking on the hell was uncomfortable, so we forgot those. The trainers were the right size, but they looked wrong on the end of my legs, as if the feet and the legs belonged to 2 completely different people. We settled on the boots. Though they had a heel, they were comfortable and fit me perfectly. Kelly took my hands and stood me up. Do you want to see yourself? Absolutely. Come on then. Taking me by the hand, she led me over to the taller of the 2 wardrobes which had mirrored doors which, while open, had been facing away from me. She stood me in front of the wardrobe and then after a pause, she swung the door shut. There was a long pause. Oh. My. God, I said. I told you, you look better in that stuff than I do. Standing before me was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. Her long blonde hair was styled around her face and hung just below her shoulders in soft golden waves. Her face was expertly made up and understated. She was a classical beauty. The skirt and top hugged her curves perfectly from her wide hips to her bust. Except it was not a she, it was me. I looked like a 16-year-old girl on her way out to a party. I struck a pose and my sister laughed. I threw her a nasty look and she shrugged. I don't mean to be nasty, she said. I'm sorry I laughed. It's just you look like me, the way I looked when I was your age. Tell you what, go downstairs and practice walking about. Fix us a drink and let me get changed. I'll join you in a bit. Okay, I said. I left her room and walked downstairs, stumbling a little on the stairs in the heels, but I soon got the hang of walking around the room and was soon pottering around with ease. I went into the kitchen and prepared 2 cups of coffee, aware all the time of the way I was dressed and the way I looked. What would happen if someone came past the kitchen window? Would they think I was Kelly? I sighed deeply. I had to take another look at myself, so I walked into the hallway where a large mirror stood just by the door. As I stood there, turning this way and that, drinking in the image and the emotion, Kelly joined me. She had changed into a leather mini-skirt with black tights and a t-shirt with the word angel picked out in sequins across her chest. She too wore knee-length boots and she had done her own hair and makeup to match mine. Wow, I said, you've pulled out all the stops. Well, I didn't want to be upstaged by my little brother, she said. She put her hands on my shoulders and stood behind me. So, How does it feel to look like a girl? It feels brilliant. I feel different, but the same all at once. Does that make sense? No, not really. Not to me anyway. Thank you, I said. What for? For the transformation, it's brilliant. She shrugged. Oh, it's nothing. You were good enough to ask, so I thought it fair to help you out. Now, how about a name? I've got a name, Michael, I said. She frowned at me. No, silly, you need a girl's name, like Michelle, Michaela? I thought about it. I like Shell. My sister frowned and then shook her head. No, that doesn't suit you. Oh well, let's worry about it later. She stood at my side and put her arm around my waist. I put my arm around her waist and we stood there, admiring ourselves and the image we could see. So, little sister, would you like to do this again? Oh yes, absolutely. Would you like to go out like that? I'm not sure. Then another voice spoke. Would either of you like to give me an explanation? We spun round. I don't know about Carrie, but my heart was in my mouth, hammering against my Adam's apple, and my self-esteem plummeted to my toes and leaked away through the heels of my boots. Mom was stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at us, her arms folded across her chest, her mouth a thin line. Carrie broke the stony silence. Mom, this is all my fault. I dressed Michael up. No, I asked her to, I interrupted. If we were in trouble and it looked like we were, I wanted to take responsibility. I've been wanting to dress up for about. Enough! Mom shouted, throwing her hands up. We fell silent and Mom put her hands on her cheeks and looked at us. Then she folded her hands in front of her. Kelly, I want you to go upstairs to your room. Right now. But I haven't done anything wrong, Kelly protested. I'm not saying you have, but I want to talk to you alone about this. Carrie started up the stairs. Halfway, she looked back at me, mouthing the words good luck. Michael, go into the kitchen and make me a cup of coffee, please. Don't you want to get changed first? Mom looked quizzically at me. Do you want to? No. Then, go into the kitchen and make me a cup of coffee, please. She headed upstairs and was soon in my sister's room. I listened at the foot of the stairs for the round of arguments and name-calling that typically ensued when my sister was being told off. There was nothing but muted conversation. I went into the kitchen and prepared another cup of coffee. As I made them, I suddenly became aware of the position I was in. A 15-year-old boy dolled up to look like a 16-year-old girl. I was suddenly ashamed of myself, disgusted with the way I looked. I sat at the kitchen table and sipped my coffee. After a few minutes, Mom came back in. She walked over to the window and picked up her coffee, drinking it as she stared out of the window. Then she turned and sat at the table opposite me. She looked at me and there was a soft smile on her face. So, why are you dressed in your sister's clothes and wearing her makeup? So I told her. I told her about the magazine article I had read and how I had wondered what it would be like to dress completely as a girl. How the curiosity had grown in me until I had gone into my sister's room and asked if I could try on some of her clothes. How Kelly had readily agreed and how she had made up my face and then dressed me. Mom listened respectfully, nodding from time to time and throwing in the odd remark like, I see and yes of course. Then, when I had finished, she sat back and smiled at me. I'm going to ask you some questions and I want some honest answers. Okay, I replied. First of all, are you gay? No. At least I don't think I'm gay. I still fancy girls. Okay. Are you a transsexual? I blinked at her. Do you want to be a girl? Do you think that you are a girl really? No, not at all. I just wanted to dress up as one and now I've done it. I like it. Mom nodded. So, would you be wanting to dress up again? That was the killer question. I shrugged as I thought about it. Well, I like that way I'm dressed and the way I feel and the way I look now, yes. I'd like to do it again. I see. And what about your friends? Would you like them to know? I thought of the few friends I had. I could tell Colin, no, he would freak out. Sam? He'd probably be okay. I shrugged as I thought through all my friends. Not yet, no. I'd like a bit more practice before anyone else sees me. Okay. Finally, would you go out dressed like that? What? In public? I had not thought of that. What if someone noticed I was a boy and started laughing at me? At best, it would be public humiliation. At worst, I could get beaten up. Then something awoke inside of me, a sense of spirit, of determination. Why shouldn't I go out as a girl? I looked good, I looked natural. I would pass, I was certain of it. And if I was in the company of others. I grinned at my mom. I'd like to try it, I said. Mom smiled at me as she finished her coffee. So, you think you're a crossdresser, do you? I nodded. Reading that article made me wonder what it would be like, and wondering what it would be like made me want to try it. And now that I've tried it, I like it. And, how common do you think it is? Not very. I don't know exactly how many men do this, but it can't be many. Mom sat back with a smile on her face. How many boys are there in your class at school? 12, no, 13. Including me. 13. Right then, do you realize that half the male population of the world has, at some point in their lives, cross-dressed? And that a quarter of the male population goes on to do it regularly? To put it in context, I would say that at least half of the boys in your class have dressed up in either their mother's or their sister's clothes at some point, and that there's 3, possibly 4, not including you, who still do it. So, I'm not the only one? Of course not. It's not socially acceptable, but that's society's fault. It's harmless and it's fun. So, do you want to go on dressing up? I thought about it. I had had a taste and had fallen in love with it. I loved the feel of the clothes and the way I looked. I smiled at her. I would like to. Okay. Well, point 1, you can't keep wearing your sister's clothes, and point 2, you can't do it all the time. I deflated a little. Mom set her cup down and leaned forward, crossing her arms on the table. There are 3 ground rules to dressing up. 1, you only do it 3 times a week. 1 is up to you, but no more than 3. 2, you are not to go out on your own. I'm sure your sister wouldn't mind taking you out, and I'm prepared to take you shopping or on trips if you want to go en femme. 3, you do not wear any of my or your sister's things unless you ask us. Do you agree? I agree. Good. Right then, that's point 2 and 3 taken care of. Now, back to point 1. She reached into her handbag and pulled her credit card out. She looked at it for a while and then held it up as if it were a winning lottery ticket. I've got nearly £1,000 on this thing, waiting to be spent. I had a lot of commission last month and a hefty bonus this month. Care to spend some of it? Yeah, sure. When? Mum checked her watch. How about today? Like, right now? Really? Go and tell your sister you need a jacket and a handbag. I want the pair of you down here and ready to leave in 15 minutes. Give me time to get changed. Okay, I said. I was halfway across the living room before she called out to me. Oh, Michael, have you thought about a name for yourself? I paused on the stairs and turned to look at her. Well, Kelly and I were talking about it, but I haven't really thought about it myself. Mom stood up and walked up to me. If you'd been born a girl, we would have called you Freya. Would you like me to call you that now? I thought about it. Freya Mitchell. It was certainly better than Michael Mitchell, and it suited me better in my current clothes. Yes, please, Mummy. Okay, Freya it is. Of you go then. I hurried up the stairs, almost stumbling in the heeled boots but maintaining my balance. I slid to a halt in front of my sister's door and knocked. Don't stand on ceremony, just come in. I entered the room and looked at Carrie. She was sorting through her wardrobes. Several things had already piled up on her bed, and I instinctively knew that she was giving them to me. I looked at her, biting her bottom lip, a sure sign of anxiety. It occurred to me Carrie would have been a terrible poker player. Well? I took a deep breath and then sighed. With that sigh, all the tension and the drama seemed to seep out of my system. I was still excited, but now there was a sense of calm and maturity. Dressing up seemed to agree with me. Mom wants to take us shopping. She says I need a jacket and a handbag. Right then, Carrie launched into another wardrobe and handed me a white jacket, cut straight like a man's jacket, but obviously feminine. I quickly slipped it on, and then Carrie handed me a handbag. I slipped it over my shoulder and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked a girl ready for a day out, and I smiled at my reflection. Then Carrie appeared in the reflection with a handful of bits and pieces. Open your handbag, she said, and I held it open for her. She explained as she dropped the pieces in the bag that she was lending me, a brush, a vanity mirror and a purse, into which I was to put all my money, and that she was giving me a lipstick in the same color I was already wearing, a mascara brush and an old mobile phone in pink which would take the SIM card out of my phone. She then zipped the bag up and smiled at me. You're all set. Well, when you've changed the SIMs over and put your money in your purse. Oh, and you can keep the jacket and bag as well. In fact, the stuff on the bed is yours already. Have a look through it. Wow, thanks sis. I walked over to the bed and held up the clothes. Mainly skirts and tops, but there was one item that immediately caught my eye. I had learned from my fashion-conscious mother and sister that every woman has to have a little black dress in her collection. The dress that I now held was a classic example. I held it up and looked at myself. I longed to try it on and even considered changing. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Freya, Carrie, are you ready? Carrie turned and frowned at me. Freya, she mouthed. It's my name. Oh, she stopped and looked at me. Then nodded. It suits you. Thank you. The door opened and Mom stood in the doorway looking anxious. The offer expires in 5 minutes, girls. Be downstairs or we're staying. We'll be down, Mum, said Carrie, slipping into a leather jacket and grabbing an old tartan rucksack. She looked at me and smiled. I'm going to enjoy having a little sister, she said. We had soon joined Mum in the hall, and when Mum opened the door, I stepped out into the world as Freya. As I sat in the car and Mum drove us to a nearby shopping center, a little further away than our usual haunt, since Mum didn't want to run the risk of us bumping into someone we knew, I wondered. I had started on an incredible journey. I wondered where it'd take me.